Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practice Growth HQ. Now, today we're going to talk about using the media to grow your practice. And some of you at this point are thinking, oh, Angus, I really don't want to be in the media. I don't want to appear on camera, etc., etc. What if I told you there are lots of ways you could get the benefit of the media without actually having to appear on camera or have a current affair sticking the camera in your face, at 6 a.m. or something? Well, the good news, it's definitely possible. And the person who I'm interviewing today about this is my guest, Matt McCann. Now, Matt's got a significant background in media, from in radio, in actually advising political candidates how to get their message across, but more recently in the space of long-term healthcare. And indeed, he's the publisher of LTC News, a major consumer-focused website about resources for health, caregiving, aging, and so on and so on. All the way from Chicago, welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Matt, we like to start with the fast five, kind of quicker questions, quicker answers, so people can get to know you quickly. Question one, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Chicago area, went to college in downstate Illinois at Southern Illinois University. From there, I worked in radio all across the country until I returned to Chicago in 1996. And that's where I've been ever since.
There we go. Very good. All right, question two, favorite book besides your own?
That's a very good question. I'm primarily into history. So I'm trying to think of one that stands out. And at the top of my head, I can't really get into, but my preferred genre is history. I think if you don't learn where you have been, you will never go forward when I read about history, and not just US history, world history, because it all kind of goes together.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I've heard it said all we learn is that we never learn. Isn't that the message from history?
Yep.
Question three, what's one of your superpowers?
I think the biggest superpower I have is to the ability to find a way to get something done. I overcome obstacles in running a website or in the insurance industry. There's obstacles, and you can't let that stop you. You got to find a way around it if you can't go through it.
I must admit that is a mindset that many a boss would love from their team members. It's kind of, oh, boss, I tried and I can't do it. And the first hurdle and I stopped. And it's like, no, keep going. There must be another way.
That's right.
All right, question four, Matt. What's something you wish your 20-year-old self knew?
Oh my goodness, not to over worry. I was a worrywart when I was younger, and I would worry about everything and look at the negative first. Now, I've turned that around as I've gotten older. I look at what the positive is. And when we get up every day, we have a choice. We have a choice to think positive and look at the good or the reverse. I have learned to think positive, and I think that changes your whole life when you are able to learn how to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Because I've heard it said that, in fact, I was listening to an interview yesterday, this guy who had reflected on meeting multiple billionaires, and that he contrasted these guys with his grandmother-in-law. And she'd been living more or less on a pension her entire life on welfare. And he said she was the happiest person I'd ever met. And these billionaires that had literally billions of dollars. They were, in terms of worry, their worries were way, way higher. So it's an interesting insight. Finally, Matt, question five, something you're grateful for.
Grateful for family and good health. Without family, you're awful lonely, and without good health, you have nothing.
Yes, indeed. I'd say those two get a run on this podcast quite regularly. All right. Well, thank
Yep.
you for that backstory. So, look, we've got the listeners curious. It's like, oh, media. Well, look, at the end of the day, if I don't have to do anything that's too uncomfortable, I suppose I'm prepared to give media a go. And I recognize that media can be a way to get a message out pretty broadly. What are some of the things that the listeners can do, I suppose, as it were, to kind of dip their toe in the media pool so that they can get some benefit for their business and get their message out?
I think the number one thing you have to find out what you're good at. Are you good at writing? Are you good at speaking? And public speaking is different than speaking like how we're speaking on a podcast. There are individuals that can talk to a room full of 1,000 people, not a problem. And you're on one with them and they freeze.
Mm.
So find out how you communicate what you're good at. If you're a writer, you use writing, and we'll talk about how you use that. If you've got the gift of gab, is it in a setting like this? Is it in a more formal setting in front of a group? You got to kind of think, what is it that you're comfortable at doing? And then once you discover that, then you maneuver to use that strength to get your message across.
Okay, all right. So understand what you're good at. I'm going to put a little asterisk there. For some of you, you may immediately fall into, oh, look, I'm pretty comfortable in writing. I had to do a lot of writing at university. I'm good at that. If I can spend a second to tell you my own journey, about maybe as long as 8 years ago, somebody challenged me back then to do a Facebook Live every day for a year. And so I made a live video every day for a year. And I would say to you at the start of the year, my heart was pounding and I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? And what were they thinking? Da, 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 da. Like it didn't take long for me to transition from that point to going, I love being on video. Like I've got a full day video shoot on Friday. I get together with my team every quarter, we'll plan it out, and I talk to the camera for, we're in a studio for 8 hours a day. And so you will have an inherent kind of thing that you're comfortable with, but I encourage you to test some things that are maybe just a little bit out of your comfort zone, because it can be like me that you can transition from being quite nervous in one media form and then not too far down the track, suddenly my pulse wouldn't raise a beat a minute being on camera now.
Absolutely. But I would add one more thing to that. Ask your friends and family what you are good at. You may think you're terrible at X, Y, or Z, but everyone else thinks you're great. Sometimes when we think about what we're good at, the stuff we think we're good at, we're maybe not as good at, but the people around you, the people who care about you, the people that see you as you are, may have a different opinion. And when you hear, oh, you're great at speaking. Oh, no, I can't do that. But everyone else is saying you are. You got to listen to what people say. Not that, again, that you can't overcome things. You got to find a way to overcome these things. But just don't ask yourself. Ask the people around you. And the feedback you get, you got to be open to.
Yep, no, I love that. All right, good. That's an excellent place to start. Figure out what I'm good at. If I'm not sure, and maybe regardless, just ask others and then you get a hint. All right, so there's a few different channels. Maybe it's interviews, maybe it's getting on video, maybe it's writing. Armed with that knowledge, what are the next steps to benefit from media and get the message out for your business?
We got to determine who your audience is. Who do you want to get the message out to? And for every one of your listeners, it may be something different, or you have different audiences. You may want to influence peers for whatever reason. Then that audience is going to be different, and the message is going to be different than potential patients,
Yes,
or regulators or whomever. So you have to identify the audience. There are so many ways to communicate today than there were even 30 years ago. Obviously, the radio, TV still exists. Now you have this podcast thing, which is a hybrid radio/TV thing that exists, that is really very available on anyone with a smartphone or a computer. You have 1,000,001 websites that target very niche audiences to wide mass audiences. So you have to determine which one of these things fits the audience that you're trying to reach. So if you're a dentist located in a small town and all you care about is those people, you identify the media available to that group. Maybe, depending on the demographics of the town, if they're more older, doing tweets may not be the best option. Instagram may not be the best option. Yet, if your audience is more wider and more diverse, some of those types of things may be helpful. Traditional radio is still alive and kicking in most parts of the world, and they are always looking for experts. You have to become that expert in your area on your specialty. Okay. And producers are looking for those experts. They're hard to come by because a lot of people are afraid to talk.
Mm.
So if you're looking to do that, if you think, yeah, talking to a host about X, Y, or Z is fun, I think I want to do that, you got to get yourself out there. And you'll be surprised when you call local or regional radio, TV networks, what have you. Hey, I'm an expert. This is what I do. This is how I do it. I'm available. And there's, of course, online publications where you can go on and add yourself to a list. There's many of them on there. I'm on there myself as an expert on long-term care planning, for example. But just simple Facebook, you mentioned Facebook, having a Facebook page for yourself and or your practice and utilizing that, and Instagram, both Facebook and Instagram, which started primarily with younger demographics, have now become mass appeal. They are the mass appeal media today. If you don't have a Facebook page, if you don't have an Instagram, and I would add Twitter or X to that now as well, you don't exist. You have to have a presence. And when you have that presence, you got to make sure that it looks and meets your expectations. Okay. If it looks sloppy, then what are they going to think of you?
You raise a few excellent points there, Matt, which we've got to unpack. The first one is who's your audience? Now, look, overwhelmingly, the listeners of Practice Growth HQ, their audience is patients, potential patients. Although I do know some of the clients that I work with are trying to effectively get the attention of their peers. For example, if they're in the education space, we educate people, we educate doctors, dentists, etc. But overwhelmingly, it's patients. The second part about that is the demographic, which is really important. And Matt's really struck a chord there. Certainly in Australia, and I assume it's the case in other countries as well, you can go onto the Australian Bureau of Statistics website and go, give me the profile, the demographic profile from my suburb, where the practice is located, or this region. And I'm sure there'd be the same data in the US and elsewhere. And what it does is it just gives you a sense of who actually lives there. Now, your own patient base will give you a bit of an idea of that, but typically, if you were to kind of graph the data, you'll end up with one or two mounds. I've done this many times. And what happens is you'll get a bit of a lump at a certain age group, and then you get a lump that's usually 20 to 30 years behind because that's the kids of that other age group. So you might get a bit of a lump, let's say at 50-year-olds, plus or minus 2 or 3 years, and then a bit of a lump for, who knows, 10 to 15-year-olds. Well, depending on the age of those people, the kind of spots that you can go get them varies enormously. If your practice, the sweet spot is 60 or 70-year-olds, then traditional media is fantastic. Newspapers, very good. Even the movies. I went to the movies last weekend with my wife, Matt, and I just couldn't help noticing I'm in my 50s. I looked around, I didn't see too many 20 or 30-year-olds in there. And so there was a lot of businesses who were promoting themselves. So that was the first one, which is who's your audience and where are they?
And here's a tool. You go to ChatGPT, okay? You tell it exactly what you want. So if you want to know the age demographics in a town or a number of miles from a town, doesn't matter where in the world, you put in exactly what you want and make sure you put in that you want the most recent data. It will tell you. It is a great tool. And if we have time, we'll get into how you can use it for other things. But ChatGPT, there's a free version of that, $10 a month. You can get the paid version. I don't work for them, but I use that as a tool, and that's so you don't have to try to go to Google and search government websites. That'll do that for you.
Yes, good saving. Yes, I must admit I've noticed in my own behavior, increasingly I'm just going to ChatGPT. I'm even getting a bit annoyed with Siri. I notice on my iPhone that I'll go, hey, what's the answer to that? And they come back and they say, here's 3 websites on that subject. Whereas I notice when I go to ChatGPT and say, what's the answer to da, 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 they give me the answer now. You've got to do your checking as ever, but absolutely. All right. So yes, get your demographics, go and ask ChatGPT for some recent data. If I can just say a really common mistake in people trying to promote their practices, they go, oh, I want all patients. And I'm going to say that's a recipe for disaster. You want to attract no one, shoot for everyone. And you notice what Matt's doing. His thing is long-term care. So he's got a particular focus on aging, on caregiving, like he's got a niche there. It doesn't mean that other people outside those age groups don't benefit from his message. It's just that he's gone for a particular group. Now, the next thing that you said, a lot of the listeners, I could almost feel the trembling from here, Matt. It's become an expert. Are you out of your mind? I've graduated in whatever year it was, along with hundreds of other healthcare professionals of the same category as me. And of course, that was hundreds of them the year before and the year after, et cetera, et cetera. I can't call myself an expert, Matt.
Well, you know what? If you have a graduate degree, you are an expert.
Yeah,
And if you call yourself an expert, you are one.
yeah,
It's really that simple. Now, you got to back it up. Obviously, if you say you're an expert and you talk like a 3 year old, it's not going to work. In the old days, you had to have, I became an expert in long term care planning when there was a blurb in the Washington Post that called me that. Ever since then, I became one of the world's leading experts in long term care planning. Why? Because some reporter called me that. That was a blessing back a long time ago. Now you just call yourself an expert. You have this an MD degree here, you went to here, and you did your internship here. That you're an expert.
yeah.
Okay. If you don't believe you're an expert, then you probably shouldn't be practicing whatever you practice.
Look, I think what Matt and I are trying to do, listeners, is to burst the bubble of expert. Expert is an incredibly nebulous thing. I reckon it might have been Tim Ferriss in 4 Hour Work Week, and he outlined the steps to become an expert in anything. I'm not medical, perhaps. Basically, he was talking about some friend of his who started within the shortest space of time, became this kind of relationships expert. And what she did was she went and joined the Relationships Association of America or whatever. And then she went and joined, and she got all of these credentials based on paying an annual fee. I'm not suggesting we do this cynically. This is for healthcare professionals. You guys have done the study. I just want to make the observation that compared to the general population, you absolutely are an expert. And the other thing no one can ever argue with is your experience. At my practice, Dr. Matt, I've been there for 20 years, or even if it's 10 years, or even if it's 5 years, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of patients with this particular situation.
When you say, I have seen in my practice blank, that's what you've seen. That is real life experience. It's
Yeah.
not theoretical.
Yeah.
You use it.
All right. All right. Thank you, guys. You've convinced me. Yes, I can see I could have some expertise. If I'm a doctor, dentist, physical therapist, etc., should I be picking part of my profession that I'm going to go after in my expertise, or it's okay to go, hey, I'm a dentist and I'm an expert with teeth and oral health?
I think it really depends on your marketing. If you're at nothing against a small town dentist, we need small town dentists. But if you're a
Yes.
small town dentist and there's only a couple of dentists in town, you can be the general dentist, and that's great. Now, if you're in a small town and you only specialize in children, okay, now you have a niche within a niche.
Yeah.
So it depends on your situation. If you're in a big city, you specialize in a particular type of procedure, then you go with what you are best at and you hammer that. And what I think happens is when a potential patient or the general public or maybe even your peers hears that and they know you're an expert in this and you do X, Y, and Z, are they going to want to see someone with that level of expertise as opposed to someone they don't know? Absolutely. But you got to identify what your expertise is in your general area of practice, and you run with it because you're able to talk about that and you have seen a lot of patients in that particular area.
Yeah. Okay. And I would just add to that, look, you don't need to be a medical specialist. You can have an undergraduate degree, you can be a doctor, dentist, physio, etc. And that doesn't mean you can't, I'll pick dental because it's one I know pretty well. It doesn't mean you can't talk about braces, even though there's such a thing as an orthodontist. As a dentist, you can still say, lots of people are getting clear aligners these days. It's very popular. And then the sentence that nobody can argue with, in my practice, what I'm seeing is ... Nobody can argue with that. So, all right, yes, I'm feeling confident. I can see I've got some expertise. I know who I'm pitching for. But Matt, how do I approach this different media?
Again, it depends whether we're talking about traditional media or new media. If you're talking about traditional media, the first thing to do is, let's start with radio. Identify radio stations that are primarily news talk. They have a lot of hours to fill. Okay, there's talk shows, and every day they have 45, 48 minutes of content surrounding commercials and news and weather. Listen to the radio station, listen to the hosts, identify a host that, yeah, he talks about or she talks about these types of things. And then you call and ask for that host's producer. Don't call and talk about the host. Host is just hosting the show.
Right.
It's the producer that is going to schedule guests and has an idea of where they're headed weeks down the road. Okay. And even if they don't have something at the moment specifically lined up with your expertise, knowing that you're out there when something maybe in the news happens, now they go through the Rolodex. So we got Dr. Smith, who is an expert on this in our town. We'll get a comment from him or her. So you reach out to these radio stations. The same thing with local TV. Okay, identify the TV stations that have newscasts. And again, they're not going to probably do a feature story on you just because you call and say so. But if you say, look, my specialty is this, if there is a news story where you need an expert to comment on it, I am available. And you give them your contact information. And the contact information has to be your personal cell phone, because news breaks out at any time. I think those are the first two steps. Same thing with the newspaper. You contact the health editor. Most bigger newspapers are going to have some kind of editor that deals with health stories. Contact them. Say, this is my area of expertise. If you have a news story and you need resource, I am your resource.
Yeah.
Reporters need resources.
One of the things I've learned in this space, Matt, and I've actually started to get to know a few people in different media, is from the practitioner side of the fence. You're like, oh, I don't know if they're ever going to want to talk to me. I don't know if they're ever going to need me. I can tell you from their point of view, as Matt's already alluded to, they've got space to fill all the time. They've got, metaphorically, inches in newspapers to fill. They've got minutes of airtime to fill, whether that's on the radio or on the news or whatever. The other thing I'd say is, if Matt and I brainstorm this issue for the next 2 minutes, we could come up with very simply the kind of things that the media would be interested in relation to your field. Now, somebody I know locally who used to work as a producer in ABC TV in Australia, she said to me, and so she's quite a senior producer, she said, health is always newsworthy. That's the first thing. Health is always newsworthy. But as a dentist, it might be, well, hey, winter's coming and it's football season. Let's talk about protecting your beautiful smiles. As a doctor, there'd be many kind of seasonal things. What's the start of summer? Let's talk about sunburn. Let's talk about skincare. Like, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to be reaching out to the media and going, hey, look, I'm aware there's a new season starting in a month's time or 2 months' time or whatever. I'm free to talk about this topic that's seasonal and what I'm seeing.
Keep in mind that news impacts at a moment's notice. So, for instance, let's say you're a surgeon and a politician or a celebrity all of a sudden announces that they are having a procedure. Oh, well, you're not going to talk to that person's doctor because they're not going to talk. But you immediately, as a reporter, need to find someone. Well, what is a triple bypass, whatever?
Right.
And if they already have you in the Rolodex, okay, they may not have talked to you in a year. All of a sudden, oh yeah, I remember this gal. She's does this type of procedure. Bang! All of a sudden, you're on the radio, you're on the TV, you're explaining. Of course, while you can't talk specifically about the celebrity or the politician, you can talk about it in general, and that is so valuable.
Matt, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this podcast, but I thought we'd do something fun because you've got a fair bit of experience. Well, you've got a lot of experience in this area. I've got a bit of experience in this area as well. You and I are going to play what I believe we called as a kid quick draw macaw. Do you remember that?
Uh-oh.
Let's go as far as we can in the next 60 seconds for practical, simple thing that the listener could do to get themselves into the media. Like what's one thing they could do? I'm going to start. I'm going to hand over to you. You're going to hand back to me. I'm going to hand over to you. Let's see how far we can go. One thing you could do, if your demographic is a bit older, in most parts of Australia, there's a free newspaper that lands on people's lawns once a week. You could contact them and say, I'd like to write a column in the space of veterinary, dental, whatever it is. All right, Matt, what's one thing people could do?
Listen to your local news or talk station and identify a personality that you like and contact them.
I like it. Read through the local newspaper. There will almost always be a health editor, and you can reach out to that person and say, what stories are coming up? I've got a few ideas.
Put up, if you do not have a Facebook page and a related Instagram page that highlights your practice with your bio and current photos.
I love it. If you're in Australia, we've interviewed the founder of this one in the US. I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but in Australia, it's called Source Bottle, source.com.au. You can register a profile there. You'll get interviewed. You get an email twice a day, and they are always looking for healthcare contacts. This media needs this person to come and speak.
Create an X account, Twitter, and start following other people in your field and media people that report on that.
Love it. All right, little bit out there. Come up with a world day or even a national day. With one of my clients, we created World No Needles Day. He got 2 radio interviews. Somebody had to create World No Tobacco Day, World No... What's to say you can't create a world no more broken teeth, no more some other kind of condition? All right, last one, Matt.
Create a blog that you set up and write. Doesn't have to be long. Just write short paragraphs on a particular topic and do it at least once a week.
Good one. All right. Well, thank you, Matt, for playing. That was fantastic. Hopefully people got some real benefit from that quick draw McGraw. I think it was a TV show.
It was a cartoon.
There we are. So there we've done. Look, Matt, thank you so much for your time. If people want to get in touch or learn more, what should they do?
They can go to my website at ltcnews.com. There's a contact section on there, and feel free to contact me and ask questions. And we do allow free columns for experts, and that would be another thing.
Yes, LTC News, as in long-term care. LTCnews.com.
LTCnews.com.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, everyone. Well, we've covered a bit there, haven't we? I suspect for many of you, the first step is, frankly, getting a little bit out of your comfort zone and then going, yes, I can see the benefit and I'm prepared to nominate myself as an expert. My question, as I say to you every week, is like, knowledge is not power. It's applied knowledge that's power. And the question I ask is simply this: what is one step you can take as a result of what you heard today? Make sure you go and do that before you go into the next thing. Finally, if you got some value from our time together, then I invite you to leave us a review where you're listening to this podcast to give us the encouragement to bring you more great content every week on Practice Growth HQ.